So in this video, I'm going to be looking at brake cues. What is a brake cue and do I need a brake cue? Now obviously, a brake cue is a cue for performing the brake shot. As simple as that. Now, the cue you choose for the brake can be any cue. It can be your playing cue. It can be a specifically designed cue for the brake. It can be a cue you find down the pool hall. There is nothing stopping you braking with any cue. So why might you want a brake cue? The main reason is that the brake shot is a very specific shot in the game of pool. It's very different from any other shot. We're trying to get a lot of power into that shot, far more than we would at any other time into the game. Delivering the cue ball with maximum speed and power into that pack to spread the balls as far as possible, hopefully potting something and getting the balls nicely spread out across the table. So the shot is different from other shots, and manufacturers have started to design cues specifically for that shot for that reason. So you might decide to get a brake cue because you might think that it will give you a better brake. That's one reason someone might want a brake cue. Another reason you might want a brake cue, and is the reason that I've got a brake cue, so it sort of tells you a little bit about my feelings about whether you should have one, is that I bought a brake cue to protect my playing cue. If you've got a playing cue that you've invested a reasonable amount of money in and invested a lot of time in, I've had my playing cue for a long time. It's something that is part of my game, and it feels very strange when I play with somebody else's cue. You want to protect that. Because the brake shot is such a powerful shot and you're really putting a lot into it, there's a danger that you could break something on your cue, you could damage the tip, a lot of wear and tear on that shot over and over again. So I bought a brake cue primarily to protect my playing cue. So that might be another reason that you would look at having one. In terms of whether the brake cue makes your brake better, I'll come to a little bit later. So what's the difference? If you look at these two cues here, this is my playing cue, which is a tailor-made cue, and that has a 9mm tip. And this cue here is a Britannia bullet cue, which I've reviewed in another video, and that has an 8mm tip. So these two cues have got small tip sizes, thin shafts, and specifically for playing the game of British 8-ball, where you've got the small cue ball, and the small tip gives you the ability to get lots of action on the cue ball. In comparison, these brake cues are a lot bigger. So we have my brake cue, which is another tailor-made cue, and then I've been sent these two by my sponsors, Table Time Sports, and I'll give you a link later in the video if you're interested in either of these cues. We've got a Britannia Cobalt, and that one and my brake cue are both 11.5mm tips. And then we've got a Baize Master Thunder, which is a 10.5mm tip. So you can see those three brake cues are a lot larger than the playing cues. And that's for a couple of reasons. As I said, the brake shot can put a bit of stress on the cue, so having a thicker shaft on the cue gives it that bit more sturdiness. It's going to last longer and you're not going to be worried so much about causing any damage to it. Then the larger tip size, I'm not going to go into masses of detail about this because it's a whole subject in itself, but the theory is that a larger tip size will allow you a little bit more room for error when striking the centre of the cue ball. With a small tip size, it's quite easy to put unwanted side on the cue ball when you're delivering the cue at pace, and you don't want that on the brake. You want to be able to hit it true and straight down the middle of the table. Another thing about brake cues, which varies and is highly debated, is the weight of the brake cue. Some manufacturers will say that Their brake cue is heavy to give you that sense of sturdiness and power when you're delivering the cue ball into the pack. Other brake cues will describe themselves as being ultra light, so that you can deliver the cue at speed and deliver the cue ball faster into the pack. Which one of these is better? It's highly debatable, and it depends on you as a player. Some players will prefer that lighter feel and being able to deliver at speed. Some will prefer a heavier cue. Personally, I prefer a heavier cue just because it gives me that sense of confidence delivering the cue with power, that I'm not doing any sort of damage to it. But it does come down very much to personal choice. So we'll have a look at these brake cues in detail and just run through the specs of them, and we'll see how they differ, and then we'll have a look at how they perform in a brake situation, and then I'll come back with my thoughts at the end. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about each of these cues. First up, we have the Britannia Cobalt, and that is a 3/4 jointed 57-inch British breaker cue. It retails for $89.99 and comes in a weight of around 17 to 19 ounces. It's got an 11.5mm tip, and that's an extra hard grand leather tip. And then the ferrule is a phenolic resin ferrule. The shaft is made of ash, and then the butt of the cue has black Gabon ebony and blue sycamore veneers to the inlays. It makes it quite an attractive looking cue. The second cue is a Baize Master Thunder, and this is a one-piece cue, again a British breaker cue, 58 inches in length, and this one is made of carbon fibre. Now, they say in the description that carbon fibre shaft is stiffer than wood, and therefore it gives you the lowest possible deflection on the shot. Now, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. It's also very resistant to warping and denting as well. It has a 10.5mm phenolic tip, and the ferrule is a white Bakelite ferrule, which again they say is resistant to cracking and chipping and breaking. So as you can see, because it's carbon fibre, there's no grain to the cue, it's completely smooth, and the whole cue is black throughout. There's no other real detailing other than the name at the end. The cue is 18.5 to 19 ounces in weight, and it retails for £229.99. And then just for comparison, I have my own brake cue, which is a tailor-made cue, the same make as my playing cue. It's got an 11.5mm tip. I'm not actually sure what the make of tip is on this cue. It's also got the black phenolic resin ferrule. It's a 3/4 jointed cue, and it weighs 19.5 ounces. And I picked this up from my local pool hall for £60. So when it comes to actually testing brake cues, it's a very difficult thing to do because the brake shot is different on every single brake. So unless you've got a machine that can deliver the cue in exactly the same line, at exactly the same speed, time after time, it's almost impossible to quantify anything, to say anything is better than another one. So all I can really do here is give you my sense of how the cue feels. Now I know that word's a little bit woolly, but anyone who's played for a while knows that you do get a sense of feel for a cue and how it's performing. So with my own brake cue here, when I first got it, I have to say I didn't notice any difference to my brake whatsoever. So I felt that the brake cue wasn't really improving my brake as an implement for actually making that brake better. But the sturdiness of the cue, the larger tip, does give me more confidence to hit the balls that little bit harder. And the more I've played with the cue over time, I think my brake has improved, purely because I have that confidence in the cue allowing me to deliver it with more power. So the cue has improved my break, but not because the cue itself is any better than my playing cue. It's just helped me to improve my break shot. One thing I would say about my break cue is that break cues tend to have quite hard tips on them, and one thing that jars a little bit with me is the sound. I don't know whether you can hear it on this video, but it's a very sort of tinny, hard sound when you contact the cue ball that jarred with me a lot when I first started playing with it. It's something I got used to, but it's quite different to this, especially the sort of soft sound I get when I play with my playing cue, which has got a fairly soft tip. So that's something that some people might like or dislike with certain cues and certain tips. So the Britannia Cobalt break cue, pretty much the same as my own break cue. It didn't really feel any different. Certainly didn't notice anything any better, any worse in terms of my break shot. But much like my own break cue, that sturdiness, the large tip, gave me the confidence to hit the balls with power. So therefore, allowed me to maintain that power through the break shot that I wouldn't quite get with my own playing cue. In terms of the cue itself, it's an attractive cue. I like it. It has a nice feel to it. I prefer the tip on this cue to my own break cue. It has a much softer and more reassuring sound, if that makes any sense, when you hit the ball. I like the look of it. It's quite a striking cue with this blue on the end. And generally a nice cue. It's a reasonable price point, I think, for a cue like this. But pretty much, as I've said with my other cue, didn't really do anything that made my break shot any better. And then finally, the Baize Master Thunder. So I had high hopes for this cue because there's something about the look of it and the fact that it's made of carbon fibre and the higher price point. It gave the impression that it was going to be that much better. But I have to be honest, it was absolutely no different from the other two cues. It feels nice. It's nice to hold. It's very smooth, so you get a real nice smooth sort of action as you deliver the cue, but nothing that much different from a wooden cue. And in terms of performance, I couldn't differentiate it from the other two. In the sales pitch for the cue, the way they describe it, they talk about the carbon fibre being stiffer and therefore giving you less deflection. Now, on the break shot, that's almost impossible for me to tell. Every time I break, the cue ball is going in a slightly different position than it was before. So for me to say that's because of deflection is impossible. That might just be that I've not delivered it quite in a straight line, or I've accidentally put some side on it. I tried to do some tests to see if I could judge whether there's any less deflection, but very difficult to tell with a human delivered cue. It may be that if you show this under mechanical sort of conditions where you had a machine delivering the cue and over again, you might be able to display that there is a little bit less deflection, but I can't say that that's the case. So I've played with all three of these break cues quite extensively. Obviously my own break cue I was using for a while, but I've played with both of these cues that have been sent quite a lot. And in summary, do I think you should own a break cue? Yes. And I was obviously always going to say that because I bought one in the first place. But the reason for it is still the same reason why I bought one in the first place, that it protects my playing cue. Do any of these cues make my break shot better? No. In all honesty, no, they don't. I can break just as well with my playing cue as I can with my break cue. But the break cues do give me the confidence in the break that I don't get with my own cue, because I'm always slightly wary about doing some damage to it. So therefore, it does make my break slightly better because I'm comfortable hitting the ball that little bit harder and putting a little bit more into the break. So it's a difficult one. But it's certainly not a magic bullet. Don't buy a brake cue thinking it's going to massively improve your brake shot. It's not like buying a pair of super shoes and running that are going to improve your performance dramatically. It's not the same thing. You might see very marginal differences, but they are marginal. So when it comes to buying one, if you decide to invest in a brake cue, then there's a few things to consider. The cost is obviously one of the first things to think about. If it's not going to make your brake shot that much better, do you want to spend a fortune on it? It's completely up to you. Depends how much disposable income you've got and what you want to invest in it. As an example, my playing cue here was £60. The Britannia Cobalt here is £89.99, and the Baize Master Thunder here is £229.99. So there's a big difference in those. And in terms of performance, there's hardly anything in it. So am I likely to pay that much more for that cue? Probably not. Don't get me wrong, I really like this cue. It's a really nice cue. It's certainly striking in its plainness, but I think that's quite a nice thing. It's very tactile. It's really nice to hold. I don't know, but I suspect over time, because of the carbon fibre, it's likely to last a little bit longer than the wood ones. You know, they're not going to get the little nicks and things in it, but I can't verify that. But is it any better to play with? No, in my opinion. The Britannia Cobalt, I have actually found myself erring towards that cue. When I've got the choice of cues, I've been heading towards that one more. So it's a little bit more expensive than my playing cue, but not much. It's just a nice, sturdy cue that I feel comfortable with when I'm playing. It's also quite an attractive cue. I do like the blue splicing here at the end, which is a little bit more interesting than my fairly dull brake cue here, but that's neither here nor there. That's just personal choice. Something else to consider if you are going to buy a brake cue is that you've got to take it with you. So I had to invest in a new case when I bought a brake cue. I had a 3/4 case so I could break down my 3/4 cue. But obviously with two cues you can't do that, so you need to be able to take them both in one piece. So I had to buy a case that was big enough to take two cues full length. So that's something else to consider. It's not something that put me off because I was looking at buying a new case anyway, but certainly something to think about if you've already forked out money for a case. And then you obviously need to take both cues to the table when you're braking and stand one up in between, so something to think about. So, as I said, in summary, will these cues make your brake better? I don't think so. Is it worth having one? Yes, I think it's worth having one if you want to protect your cue, your playing cue. Those are my general thoughts on it. It is just a matter of opinion. There are lots of people who will argue either way, whether you should or shouldn't have one. It's just my own personal thoughts, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight into choosing a brake cue if it's something you decide to look into. So if you are interested in purchasing either of these cues from Table Time Sports, then there's a special promotional offer on for Pool School viewers. If you purchase the Britannia Cobalt cue, then you will get a 12 box of triangle chalk and a cue slicker, which you just place over the cue and you can polish up the cue, keep it nice and clean. If you purchase the Baize Master Thunder cue, then you also get 12 box of chalk and a little chalk clip holder as well. So you place your chalk into there like that, and then you can just clip that onto your belt. So a handy place to keep your chalk. Comes with a square and round holder there for different types of chalk. So all you need to do to take advantage of the promotional offer is, once you've chosen your cue, add it to your cart, and then if you click on View Cart, and then in the special order instructions box, just type in Pool School BK, and then your promotional goodies will arrive with your order. So thanks once again to our sponsors Table Time Sports, and we'll hope to see you in the next video again soon.
If you want to see more practice routines and pull tutorials, then please remember to subscribe. And if you're interested in any of the equipment I use in this video, then there are links in the description below.